Every year, more than 85 million tourists arrive in Spain, the second most visited country on Earth. For many Americans, the dream is simple: tapas in a sun-drenched plaza, flamenco in narrow whitewashed streets, a pace of life slow enough to finally feel like a vacation. For a growing number of visitors, especially seniors who saved for years and flew across an ocean, that dream collides with something else. Over-tourism protests where locals spray visitors with water guns. Pickpocket networks so coordinated they operate in shifts. Heat that turns an afternoon walk into a health risk. Cities where the crowds, drawn by the postcard image, have made that image almost impossible to experience. Today, we're ranking 15 of the most visited Spanish cities, from the ones that demand real caution to the few that still deliver everything Spain is supposed to be. At the end, we'll reveal the safest, most comfortable city on the list, where the food, architecture, and pace of life align without the chaos. Along the way, I'll show you the warning signs that don't make it into the brochures, the specific neighborhoods, scams, and seasonal traps that catch visitors off guard every year. Stay with me, because the city at number 15 is one of the most iconic destinations in Europe, and most visitors have no idea what they're walking into until it's too late to change plans. Number 15. This city is, for many Americans, the entire reason they decided to visit Spain. Gaudí's architecture, the Mediterranean waterfront, a culture that produced some of the most famous artists in history. And in the summer of 2024, residents of its most famous beachfront neighborhood sprayed visitors with water guns, wearing shirts with a message that left no room for interpretation. Barcelona, the city's mayor, announced that all tourist apartment licenses, every single one, will expire by 2028 with no renewals. That's not a minor policy adjustment. It's a city government formally acknowledging that tourism, at its current scale, has become a problem it needs to actively reverse. On paper, Barcelona is one of the great cities of Europe. The Sagrada Familia, the Gothic Quarter, beaches within the city limits, world-class food. In practice, it receives around 26 million visitors a year into a metropolitan area of 5 million residents, and that ratio has reshaped the city in ways that directly affect the visitor experience. La Rambla remains one of the highest-density pickpocketing corridors in Europe. Local police report thousands of theft incidents during peak season, and that covers only the ones reported. The methods are coordinated, staged distractions, fake petitions, groups working in relay so that by the time you notice something is missing, the thief is 3 streets away. The Sagrada Familia, the most visited monument in Spain, now requires advance booking, and even with a timed ticket, the queue regularly exceeds 3 hours without one. Housing pressure has pushed rents in neighborhoods like Gracia and El Born to levels that displaced the working-class Catalan families who gave those neighborhoods their character. What's replaced them is a layer of businesses built around tourist turnover. Rooftop bars, souvenir shops, restaurants with QR code menus designed to process visitors quickly rather than feed them well. For seniors, the heat is a genuine consideration. July and August regularly bring temperatures into the mid-30s Celsius, and the Gothic Quarter's narrow streets trap humidity in a way that makes midday walking tours demanding. Barcelona's architecture and food culture are extraordinary. But the version accessible to most tourists in peak season has been reshaped by volume into one of the more demanding European destinations for seniors, both physically and in the vigilance required. Have you been to Barcelona? Did you experience the crowds and pickpocket warnings firsthand, or find a quieter side of the city? Share your experience in the comments. Your perspective might help someone else plan smarter. From the Mediterranean coast to the geographic and political heart of Spain, a city that runs smoothly most of the year, For a few months each summer, it becomes something else entirely. Number 14. Madrid. Madrid is Spain's capital, and in most respects, a well-run, walkable European city with 3 world-class art museums, within walking distance of each other, and a public transport system that works. The issue isn't the city as a whole, it's 2 things: the tourist corridor around Puerta del Sol and Gran Via, and the climate during the months most Americans visit. On paper, Madrid offers the Prado, the Reina Sofia, and the Thyssen-Bornemisza, arguably the finest concentration of art museums in continental Europe, alongside elegant boulevards, and a famously late-night culture. In practice, the central tourist zone has developed the same scam ecosystem found in Barcelona and Rome, and the continental climate produces summer heat that catches unprepared visitors off guard. Madrid sits on a high plateau at over 600 meters, so its summer heat is dry but extreme. July and August regularly see afternoon temperatures above 38 degrees Celsius. The city essentially shuts down between 2 and 5, not as a tourist inconvenience, but because locals structure their day around avoiding that window. Visitors who don't adjust find themselves sightseeing during the exact hours the city is least equipped for it. Puerta del Sol and Gran Via have developed a concentration of street performers, costumed characters, and free gift scams, bracelets placed on wrists, sprigs of rosemary pressed into hands, followed by aggressive demands for payment. None of it is dangerous, but it's exhausting and concentrated in a few blocks every first-time visitor walks through. The Prado, while extraordinary, requires real stamina. The collection spans multiple floors, air conditioning is inconsistent in older sections, and the queue without advance tickets can exceed an hour in peak season. Restaurants in the tourist zone around Plaza Mayor consistently rank lower in quality and higher in price than restaurants a 10-minute walk away. A pattern so well documented, it has its own name among Madrid food writers: the Plaza Mayor markup. Madrid works very well for travelers who plan around the heat and stay out of the few blocks where the tourist economy is most concentrated. For those who don't, extreme midday heat plus a scam-dense central zone can define the entire trip. From a capital that shuts down for a few hours each afternoon to a city in the south where that shutdown isn't an inconvenience, it's survival. Number 13. Seville. Seville is one of the most beautiful cities in Spain. The Cathedral and Giralda Tower, the Real Alcazar with its Moorish architecture and gardens, the Santa Cruz Quarter with its orange trees and tiled courtyards, all as striking as the photographs suggest. The problem has nothing to do with crowds or scams. It's the thermometer. On paper, Seville offers some of the finest Moorish and Gothic architecture in Europe in a walkable historic center. In practice, it's regularly the hottest city in mainland Europe. And, for seniors, the climate isn't a footnote. It's the factor that determines whether the trip is enjoyable or genuinely risky. Seville has recorded temperatures above 46 degrees Celsius in recent summers. The city has begun naming heat waves the way other regions name hurricanes, a sign of how seriously authorities now treat it. July and August afternoons routinely exceed 40 degrees, and the historic center's narrow stone streets radiate heat back after absorbing it through the day. The Real Alcazar and the Cathedral both involve significant walking on stone with limited shade, and both draw substantial crowds that compound the heat with body density. Queue times without advance booking can exceed 90 minutes at the Alcazar in peak season. For seniors with cardiovascular conditions, heat-related illness is a genuine, well-documented risk in Seville during July and August. Spanish health authorities issue heat warnings during these months, and hospital admissions for heat-related conditions rise measurably among tourists and elderly residents alike. The flip side. Seville in spring is considered by many the single best time to visit anywhere in Spain. The Feria de Abril and Semana Santa bring the city's culture to its most vivid expression. With temperatures in the comfortable low to mid-20s, Seville isn't a city to avoid, it's a city to time correctly. Visiting in July or August as a senior introduces a real health risk that visiting in spring or fall simply removes, while delivering a more comfortable and arguably more beautiful version of the same city. From extreme heat in the interior to the coast, where the temperature is more forgiving, but the development around one of Spain's most historic port cities tells its own story. Number 12. Malaga and the Costa del Sol Resort Strip. Malaga itself has undergone a genuine renaissance over the past 2 decades. A historic center with Picasso's birthplace, a Roman theater, a Moorish fortress, and a contemporary art scene that has earned comparisons to far larger cities. The problem isn't Malaga the city. It's the 60 kilometers of coastline stretching west toward Gibraltar, developed in the 1960s and 70s into one of the densest concentrations of resort tourism in Europe. On paper, the Costa del Sol offers guaranteed sunshine, beaches, golf courses, and an expat infrastructure catering to British and Northern European retirees. In practice, towns like Torremolinos and Benalmádena were built rapidly during a tourism boom with little architectural coordination, producing a coastline where 1970s high-rise blocks sit directly on the beachfront. A built environment that prioritizes density over character. Torremolinos built its tourism economy in the 1960s and 70s with minimal planning oversight, producing a strip long described as one of the more dated and aesthetically compromised stretches of Mediterranean coastline. The beaches themselves are functional. Wide, sandy, calm, but the backdrop is concrete rather than the washed Pueblo aesthetic most visitors associate with southern Spain. Nightlife districts in parts of the Costa del Sol have developed a reputation for rowdy behavior among younger tourists, creating an atmosphere uncomfortable for travelers seeking a quieter holiday, particularly in the evenings along the main strips. Malaga's airport is the busiest in southern Spain, specifically because it serves this entire coastline, meaning the airport, transit corridors, and car rental facilities can be far more congested than the size of Malaga City would suggest. The positive side: Malaga's Old Town has been transformed with the Centre Pompidou Malaga, the Picasso Museum, and a pedestrianized, historic core that rivals Seville's for charm with a fraction of the crowds. Malaga City is increasingly excellent. The resort towns built during the original boom have not aged as gracefully, and travelers expecting the architectural charm of Andalusia's interior towns will find a dated beach resort strip instead. From a developed mainland coastline to an island whose international reputation has become so dominant it now overshadows everything else. Number 11. Ibiza Town. Ibiza is a genuinely beautiful island, a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its biodiversity and the well-preserved old town of Dalt Vila, with Phoenician, Roman, and Moorish history layered into its walls. None of that is what most people know Ibiza for, and that reputation gap creates a real problem for travelers who arrive without understanding what they're walking into. On paper, Ibiza Town offers a UNESCO-listed fortified old town, excellent beaches, and a Mediterranean climate. In practice, the island's identity as one of the world's foremost nightlife destinations means large portions of it, particularly around the port and in towns like Sant Antoni, operate at a volume fundamentally incompatible with a quiet holiday. The nightclub culture isn't a side feature. It's a primary economic driver, with some of the world's largest clubs operating during the summer. The noise and party atmosphere near the port extend well beyond club walls into surrounding accommodation during peak months. Dalt Vila, the walled old town, is genuinely worth visiting, and during daytime hours offers a completely different experience. Steep cobbled streets, a cathedral with harbor views, and a sense of history that predates the island's modern reputation by over 2,000 years. Accommodation pricing during peak season reflects the island's premium positioning. Rooms in well-located areas in July and August can rival or exceed Mykonos or Santorini. Outside the main town and nightlife zones, the north of the island, around Portinox and the interior villages, offers a genuinely quiet, agricultural character most visitors never see, because their itinerary never takes them more than a few kilometers from the port. Ibiza town and its surroundings are not designed for a quiet senior getaway during peak season. The quieter north exists, but reaching it and avoiding the areas shaped by the nightlife economy requires deliberate planning the average itinerary doesn't include. From an island shaped by its nightlife to a city whose problem is the opposite. It's so perfectly positioned as a day trip from Madrid that almost nobody experiences it any other way, and that creates its own kind of compression. Number 10. Toledo. Toledo sits less than 40 minutes from Madrid by high-speed train, which is both the best and worst thing about it. The city, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, perched on a granite outcrop above a bend in the Tagus River, with a skyline of towers and spires barely changed in 500 years, is one of the most visually striking in Spain. The problem is what that proximity to Madrid does to its daily rhythm. On paper, Toledo offers an extraordinary concentration of Christian, Jewish, and Islamic heritage within a compact, walkable core, accessible on a single-day trip from the capital. In practice, that accessibility means Toledo absorbs an enormous volume of coach tours, arriving in a narrow midday window, creating a crush at the major sites between roughly 11 and 3 that doesn't reflect the city's character at any other hour. The Cathedral of Toledo becomes genuinely difficult to experience between late morning and mid-afternoon when multiple tour groups move through simultaneously, each following a guide holding a numbered sign or colored umbrella. The same applies to the monastery of San Juan de los Reyes and the synagogue of Santa Maria la Blanca. Toledo's old town sits on a steep hill with streets that climb and twist at genuinely demanding gradients. Unlike Seville's flat center, Toledo requires sustained uphill walking on uneven stone, a meaningful consideration for travelers with mobility limitations. An escalator system connects the lower town to the upper city, which helps significantly but doesn't address the gradients within the old town itself. Hotels within the walled city are limited, which means most day trip visitors never see Toledo after about 4 in the afternoon, precisely when the coach tours depart and the city's actual atmosphere returns. Restaurants catering to the day trip crowd cluster around the cathedral and main squares, with quality and pricing reflecting volume tourism rather than the city's genuine culinary tradition, which exists, but in smaller establishments away from the main routes. Toledo as a rushed day trip. Arriving with the morning coaches, leaving before evening, delivers a compressed and often frustrating version of one of Spain's most significant cities. Toledo as an overnight stay, arriving as the tour groups leave, is a completely different and far better experience. 10 cities. 10 different reasons Spain can wear down even the most enthusiastic traveler. Crowds, heat, scams, and development that hasn't aged well. But notice something about every one of these places. They're all famous for genuinely good reasons. The architecture is real. The history is real. The food is real. The problem has never been Spain itself. It's the gap between the volume of visitors a place receives and the infrastructure built to receive them. And in a handful of Spanish cities, that gap doesn't exist. The next 5 cities show what Spain looks like when that balance holds. And it's not a compromise. It's what you came for. Number 5. And from here, everything changes. The remaining cities deliver Spain at its best, without asking you to fight for it. Number 5. Valencia. Valencia is Spain's third largest city, and it offers almost everything Barcelona's is known for. Beaches, architecture, food culture, a Mediterranean pace, at a fraction of the crowd pressure and cost. It is, by a meaningful margin, the most underrated major city in Spain for seniors. Valencia is the actual birthplace of paella, and the version served at the Mercado Central, one of Europe's most beautiful covered markets, housed in a 1928 modernista building, bears little resemblance to the tourist versions sold in Barcelona's beachfront restaurants. The market itself, filled with produce, seafood, and the unhurried energy of a city that still feeds itself, is worth half a day on its own. The City of Arts and Sciences, a futuristic Calatrava complex with an opera house, a science museum, and one of Europe's largest aquariums, sits at the end of a 9-kilometer park running through the center along a former riverbed, diverted after a catastrophic flood in 1957. The result is a city center that's a long green corridor rather than a highway, flat, shaded, and entirely walkable for seniors. Monthly rent for a one-bedroom in Valencia averages around €1,000, a fraction of Barcelona's. That ratio applies to hotels, restaurants, and everyday costs too. For travelers staying more than a few days, the difference compounds quickly. The beach, Playa de la Malvarosa, is wide, clean, and dramatically less crowded than Barcelona's Barceloneta, with the same Mediterranean light and none of the tension. Valencia delivers the Mediterranean Spain experience: beaches, food, architecture, climate, without the over-tourism pressure that defines Barcelona. For seniors, the flat layout and lower costs make it one of the most comfortable major Spanish cities to spend a week in, from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic coast of northern Spain. A region with a completely different climate, culinary identity, and a reputation among serious food travelers that rivals anywhere in Europe. Number 4. San Sebastián. San Sebastián sits on the Bay of Biscay in Spain's Basque Country. It solves one of the central problems affecting so much of this list: the heat. The Atlantic climate means summer temperatures rarely exceed the mid-20s, even in August, a genuine relief for seniors who want to visit Spain without timing their trip around extreme heat warnings. La Concha Beach, curving along the bay in the center of the city, is consistently rated among the finest urban beaches in Europe. A wide crescent of sand framed by hills with a promenade that makes for one of the most pleasant waterfront walks in Spain. The food culture is on another level. San Sebastián has one of the highest concentrations of Michelin stars per capita of any city in the world, and at the accessible end, the Old Town's Pinzos bars, the Basque take on tapas, offer some of the best casual eating in Europe. The tradition is to move between several bars over an evening, trying different specialties at each. Social, affordable, and entirely manageable for seniors. The city is compact and walkable, with the Old Town, the beach, and the funicular up Monte Igueldo, offering panoramic views over the bay, all within easy reach of each other. San Sebastián is more expensive than Valencia and significantly smaller, meaning fewer hotel options and higher prices during the city's famous film festival in September. Outside that window, it remains one of the most comfortable and rewarding Spanish cities to visit. San Sebastián offers a genuinely different Spain: cooler, smaller, and built around one of the world's great food cultures. For seniors seeking quality over scale, it has few rivals anywhere in the country, from the Basque Coast back to Andalusia, but to a city whose single most important building rivals anything in Seville or Granada, and that receives a fraction of either city's crowds. Number 3. Córdoba. Córdoba was, 1,000 years ago, one of the largest and most sophisticated cities in the world. the capital of the Caliphate of Córdoba, a center of learning that drew scholars from across the Islamic and Christian worlds. The physical evidence survives in a single building that is, without exaggeration, one of the most extraordinary structures in Europe. The Mezquita Cathedral, the Mosque Cathedral of Córdoba, began as a mosque in the 8th century, with a forest of over 800 columns, supporting double-tiered red and white striped arches that create one of the most mesmerizing interior spaces in the world. In the 16th century, a Renaissance cathedral was built directly into its center. The result is a building that's simultaneously a mosque and a cathedral, layered into each other in a way that exists nowhere else on Earth. Unlike the Alhambra in Granada, which requires booking weeks or months ahead due to visitor caps, the Mezquita's larger capacity means it rarely reaches the same congestion, even in peak season. Early morning visits, the first hour after opening, can offer near solitude inside one of the most significant religious buildings in the world. The Jewish quarter, the Juderia, surrounding the Mezquita is a UNESCO-listed maze of whitewashed lanes, flower-filled courtyards, and small plazas that's genuinely beautiful and significantly less crowded than the old quarters of Seville or Granada. Córdoba's flat to gently sloped terrain makes it considerably easier to navigate than Toledo or Granada. The Roman bridge across the Guadalquivir, with views back toward the Mezquita's bell tower, is one of the most photogenic spots in Andalusia, and rarely crowded even at sunset. Córdoba shares Seville's extreme summer heat, so the same seasonal advice applies. Spring and autumn are far more comfortable than July and August. Córdoba offers architectural significance on the level of Granada's Alhambra or Seville's cathedral, with smaller crowds and an old town that's easier to navigate. It's one of the most underrated cities in Spain relative to what it contains. From one extraordinary Moorish monument to the one that, more than any other building in Spain, defines what international visitors imagine when they think of Andalusia. Number 2. Granada. The Alhambra is the most visited monument in Spain. A fortified palace complex built by the Nasrid dynasty in the 13th and 14th centuries, set on a hill above the city with the Sierra Nevada rising behind it. It is, by wide consensus among people who have seen many palaces, the most beautiful one in Europe. The Nasrid palaces, the heart of the complex, contain rooms where the stucco and tile work is so intricate that entire walls appear to be made of lace rather than plaster. The Court of the Lions, the Hall of the Ambassadors, the Gardens of the Generalife, with their fountains and cypress hedges, every section reveals a different aspect of a civilization at its artistic peak. Tickets require advance booking, often weeks ahead in peak season, but the system is well organized, and timed entry means the crowding inside, while present, is managed rather than chaotic. The Albayachin, the old Moorish quarter on the hill opposite the Alhambra, is a UNESCO-listed maze of narrow lanes, white houses, and hidden plazas that offers the single best view of the Alhambra. From the Mirador de San Nicolás, with the palace framed against the Sierra Nevada, especially at sunset. Granada remains significantly more affordable than Seville or Barcelona, and the tradition of free tapas with every drink order, a custom that has survived here more robustly than almost anywhere else in Spain, means evenings out are social and inexpensive. The city's elevation and proximity to the Sierra Nevada give it a climate that, while still hot in summer, is measurably less extreme than Seville or Córdoba, with cooler evenings year-round. Granada combines the single most significant monument in Spain with an old town that rewards wandering, a cost of living well below Spain's most famous cities, and a climate more forgiving than anywhere else in Andalusia. It earns its position near the top of this list, and now one city left. The one that earns the top spot not by being the most famous, though it's far more significant than most Americans realize. But by offering something none of the previous 14 cities can, a sense of arrival built into the place itself. Number 1. Santiago de Compostela. If the name sounds familiar, but you can't quite place it, you're not alone. And that's part of what makes it the right choice for the top of this list. Santiago de Compostela is the capital of Galicia, in the green, rainy northwest corner of Spain, a region with a climate, cuisine, and character that feels almost like a different country from Andalusia or the Mediterranean coast. For over 1,000 years, it has been the destination of the Camino de Santiago, one of the most significant pilgrimage routes in the Christian world, walked by people from across Europe converging on a single cathedral that holds, according to tradition, the remains of the Apostle James. The Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela sits at the heart of a UNESCO World Heritage Old Town. Granite buildings, covered arcades, and squares that have absorbed centuries of pilgrim traffic without losing their function as a living city. The Praça do Obradoiro, the square in front of the cathedral's Baroque facade, is one of the great public spaces in Europe, and unlike the major squares of Madrid or Barcelona, it functions as a gathering point for people who have, in many cases, just completed a walk of hundreds of kilometers. The atmosphere is genuinely different from anywhere else on this list. Emotional, communal, and largely free of the transactional tourism economy that defines so many famous Spanish destinations. Galicia's climate is temperate and green, more like Ireland or northern Portugal than the Spain most Americans picture. Summer temperatures rarely exceed the mid-20s, removing the heat concern that affects Seville, Córdoba, Madrid, and Granada entirely. The food culture is built around some of the finest seafood in Europe: pulpo a la gallega, octopus prepared with paprika and olive oil, and percebes, the prized goose barnacles harvested from the region's wild Atlantic coastline. The Mercado de Abastos, Santiago's central market, is one of the great food markets of Spain, with a fraction of the crowds of Valencia's or Madrid's equivalents. Getting here is straightforward. Santiago has its own airport with connections from Madrid and other major Spanish and European cities, and the city itself is compact and entirely walkable. Built largely on manageable terrain compared to the steep climbs of Toledo or Granada's, Albaytzin, what Santiago offers is something none of the other cities quite capture: a destination built around the idea of arrival itself. Every other city on this ranking is a place people visit. Santiago is a place people complete something at, and that changes the entire atmosphere, from the cathedral square to the cafes that have served pilgrims for centuries. That's the thread running through this list. The most famous Spanish destination and the best one for a senior traveler are rarely the same place. Crowds, heat, and infrastructure built for a volume of visitors no city was ever designed to absorb, turn a dream destination into an exhausting one. The cities at the top succeed not because they're undiscovered, but because what makes them special hasn't yet been overwhelmed by how many people know about it. And that brings us to the end of the list. 15 Spanish cities, ranked from the ones that demand real planning and caution to the one that quietly delivers everything Spain is supposed to be. What this ranking shows is that Spain's biggest names, Barcelona, Madrid, Seville, are famous for genuinely good reasons. But fame, at the scale these cities now operate at, comes with a cost: crowds that make the Sagrada Familia feel like an airport terminal. Heat that turns an afternoon in Seville into a health consideration. Pickpocket networks that operate like small businesses on La Rambla. The cities that earned the top: Valencia, San Sebastián, Córdoba, Granada, and Santiago de Compostela, succeed because they deliver the architecture, food, and atmosphere without asking you to fight a crowd, melt in the heat, or watch your bag every 30 seconds. Now I want to hear from you. Which Spanish city would you move up on this list? Have you been to Santiago de Compostela, and did it live up to its reputation? Share your experience in the comments below. Your perspective might be exactly what someone planning their trip to Spain needs to hear. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making honest, research-based travel content like this. Because the best Spanish city isn't the one on the cover of every travel magazine. It's the one that fits the way you actually travel.